All right. I hit go live and then it told me it wasn't going to work. And then all of a sudden it says we're live. So hopefully it works.
As usual.
I'll go check on another platform and just I know, right? Make sure it's streaming. This is actually the first restream's been pretty reliable for me so far. Um, Anyways, fabulous to be here this morning with another 99 Dev Problems show. Really looking forward to this conversation, specifically due to, as we were chatting in pre-show, like the AI nature of your role and how I really truly like how deep the roots on the ground are for you in San Francisco with the AI movement, and it's just interesting to hear about, right? So, long story short, I would love to have you introduce yourself and tell us more about
Yeah.
you.
Everyone, my name is Elvis, same as, let's see, I'm a Christian. I live in San Francisco, and I work as a developer advocate at a startup called Chalk. And we recently raised our Series A, probably, I guess we announced like maybe a month ago. Yeah. And so now we're just, ramping up with like hiring and, go to market and just getting the word out.
I love that. Cool. Well, we'll definitely dive into that a bit more because I want to hear all about it. Before we dive more into like chalk and what your day to day looks like,
Mhm.
how did you get started in technology? Was this like an early aspirational thing as like a child you enjoyed it? Like, do you have a formal education? Sort of how did that all start and how'd you end up where you are today?
Yeah. So I grew up in Georgia, and I think in elementary and middle school, I was really, really into math. And I feel like I had this like weird progression where like, okay, I wanted to do math, and then I found it to be too theoretical. And so I was like, let me do physics. And then I found that to be too theoretical. And then eventually one day I was playing like this video game in middle school, and the game I was playing, someone released the source code for. And so I would like So I downloaded this source
Ooh.
code, and then I would like try to like go through the code and figure out like, okay, what is like statistically the best things I can, I guess, buy to be like the strongest person. And I think as soon as I
Yep.
saw code, I was like, I love this thing. Um, yeah, and so since then, I've probably really wanted to like at least know how to program, because it's like I was able to read it, but I could definitely not write it. Or I could write some of it if I like copy and paste from other things, then you like change stuff. And so in high school, I took a lot of math and computer science. Um, I guess I took like probably like three computer science classes in high school. And so then when I went to college, I went to liberal arts college, and you typically don't declare until like the end of your second year. And I declared like my first week of
Mm.
school, and then my like CS faculty is like, "Oh, are you sure?" And I'm like, "Yeah, like this is the only thing I know to do, and gives me the best chance at graduating," which I actually ended up not doing. I ended up dropping out to join a startup. Yeah, but it was a super helpful environment being at a small school studying computer science, because we were able to get a lot of support. And then I guess my freshman summer, I interned at Facebook, and then I went back my sophomore year, and then I kind of was disillusioned with big tech, and so I actually switched from like wanting to be in big tech to wanting to be a professor, because I TA'd computer science, and that was like
Mm.
my favorite thing. Like I literally had skipped some classes to like TA, because I just enjoyed TAing so much. Like I would start TAing at
Aw.
like 5 p.m. and then be there until like 1 a.m. and just like miss dinner like accidentally. And so I was like, let me try to be a professor. And my professors were like, you love teaching, so maybe pursue that. And then I took my junior summer, I did research. We were doing like ML and public health, but then my advisor told me not to do a PhD, because he said that I wouldn't have the patience for one, and because like the feedback loops are so long, that he said I probably would get like disillusioned and then end up not finishing. And so I
Mhm.
took a gap semester to like keep working with him and then like finish that paper. And then after that, I became super depressed because I didn't know what to do, because I was like, I can't go to big tech. Like, I
Mm.
shouldn't be a professor. And so eventually COVID happened. And then I ended up, helping this startup that my friend worked at. and then they were like, "Oh, you must not be working if you're doing all this stuff for us." And I was like, "I'm not." And then they eventually were like, "Do you want to join?" And so I joined. And that startup is called Warp, which is like a modern terminal. Uh, and so
Yep.
that's my journey. It was very like random and sporadic, but
That is super cool. That was like really awesome to hear. I have so many points at which I could like relate to, especially TAing. So when I taught myself how to code. I didn't have a formal education, attempted to go to college and dropped out multiple times for multiple different things. But after I had moved to the Minneapolis area because I was originally in
mhm,
Minnesota, I started going to like Girl Develop It classes and being a TA. Like I just
yeah,
volunteered and they were teaching women to code. And so I was like, oh, this is cool. So I TA'd and then started talking to the people behind the organization. And they're like, we actually need more teachers. Like, would you want to
that
teach? And I
makes
was like, what? Why would you want me to
uh,
teach? Like I did not realize like how much I really love to like actually teach other people things that I knew. And so I just did it because I was like, yes, I had a blast TAing and ended up teaching like 300 women to code
amazing.
through the organization. So like I very much yeah, it was amazing. I can very much relate. And I think that that really ties into what I feel like, makes us really powerful developer
Yeah,
relation practitioners, right? Is that ability to like understand someone and what they need and then convert that into something that can be easily explained and taught to someone who maybe doesn't know how to do it.
right.
So that is super super cool.
And the
I
effort,
love that.
like the like
I'm
I was
sorry,
gonna say
what?
like the I feel like DevRel people are so different, but one of the unifying commonalities is this like innate desire to like teach and like the effort that we go through to
Yes.
like, okay, I said this doesn't make sense to you. I'm gonna try again with a different metaphor and just keep trying until you get it because it's like I really
Yes.
believe like you can get this. Like it's yeah, and so I feel like that's been kind of like one of the unifying needles I've seen between DevRel people. Just love teaching. Yeah,
Yeah. I agree. I agree. That like empathy and desire to like expand the knowledge to somebody
yeah,
else.
so good.
Yeah. Love it. Okay. Warp is a great tool. So were you early on, like as you were helping them, like did you end up playing a DevRel role or what did you end up getting to do at Warp?
Yeah, so I pretty much they pretty much just made a role for me, right? So I guess I was like,
That's
yeah.
amazing.
So this was like they were still kind of like in beta, so they hadn't announced like
Yep.
their seed or Series A or anything like that. So I ended up being like maybe like the ninth person, and they pretty much were like, "You're
Mm,
not, qualified to be like, a senior engineer because that's kind of like the bar there, uh, coming out of college." And so
sure.
they gave me a like developer experience engineer role. He just came up with that.
Mm,
Also, because I love talking to people, I like figuring out like why things don't work, like why are people churning, like what are people struggling with, and yeah. So, for me, I was like, I don't care what my role is. I just want to work. Like working on a terminal is like the coolest thing, especially for someone like me, because
yeah.
I had like like the crazy NeoVim setup. I was using like Tmux, all of these CLI tools, and I was like Warp can kind of replace all of them, and it's also like as a TA, there are like so many kids that I was trying to keep in the major, or they would get to the terminal and then
Mm,
struggle, and then they would see that as a reflection of like
mm-hmm.
them not being able to like be an engineer, and I'd have to be like, "This tool is like
Oh.
40 years old. Like, I promise you, it's not you. It's like the tool because it doesn't tell you why what you did is wrong. Like, it doesn't help you do things correctly. Like, it's definitely the tool. So being able to like join Warp and then be around Zach and see his vision of like making it accessible and helping people be productive, both in a individual setting and also a team setting, was like, how can I not, drop out of college to do this? But I guess one of the funny things though is that my parents thought, because I was just at home, so my parents thought I like lied to them. They were like, because they've never heard of it, they don't know what it
Oh.
is. Not like lied to them, but they were like, "Is this a real job? Like
Yeah.
you guys are people. I've never heard of you guys." And it's also because I had internet Facebook, so they were like, "Just go back to Facebook." Um, and it's funny because like
Mm-hmm.
Warp we have retreats, and so my first retreat was in Hawaii, and so like maybe like a week before the retreat, I was
Nice.
like, "Oh, mom, I need you to like drop me off at the airport." And she's like, "Where are you going?" And I was like, "I'm going to Hawaii." And she's like, "What?" And I'm like, "Yeah, like I'm gonna go meet my team." And she's like, "Oh, this is real. Like you're not like doing like crypto." Because that was like during COVID, yeah. Because I was like in my room, right? And it's like, "Oh, you mean last week you were playing video games,
Yep.
and now you're working at this company?" Yeah. Anyway, so I had to like go to the retreat and then like take
That's
pictures and be
funny.
like, "This is my team. Like they're real." And then we announced the Series A. Like,
I have a
yeah,
real
a few
job.
months later, and she's like, now she was super into it. Now she's like, "Guys, like he's working on this tool that's better for developers," and so it definitely like flipped post announcement. So that was fun.
Oh, that's
Yeah, that was good.
amazing. That is
Yeah,
fun. I could see that. Like, I know my parents, like, they try to understand what I do. And, like, I've basically just told them, I'm like, I just make friends with
yeah,
developers because, like, they don't get it and they're not at all related to sort of any technology or anything. And so it's always kind of fun having that conversation with your parents of like, what are you doing? Like, as my career has evolved, I'm just like, yeah, I'm just at another company. You don't know who they are, like whatever, you
yeah,
know. And then when I joined like Twitter or like Snapchat, they're like, "Oh my gosh, like you're working at this huge company." I was like, "It's really not that big of a
yeah,
deal, just because you
yeah. Just
know."
because you've seen
So
it.
I think they probably thought it was, yeah, exactly. I think they probably thought it was the coolest when I worked at General Mills because they're like, "Hey, can you get us a discount on
Oh yeah, for
groceries?"
sure. Yeah,
I was like, "I'm an engineer. No, I cannot get you a discount on your
yeah.
groceries." That's fun. Well, that had to have been like a few years ago, right? Because I think
Yeah,
I remember
2020.
Zach actually had reached out to me super early on. Like I want to say like 20, yeah, like 2021 is when I think he had reached out to me, I believe, about what he was building.
Mhm.
And I never, got involved or got, brought into anything at that time. We had just kind of chatted. I think it was like early days of like, what do we do with DevRel? What do we do with growth? Like, how do we
Yeah,
kind of bring forward? So I was excited about the tool at that time because I feel the same way. I just feel like command line, like, traditionally, like on a Mac or whatever tool it is you're using, like you said, it's like old and it's outdated and it's such a mystery.
sure.
So even if you are like starting to feel some confidence, like you can have one thing go wrong and think you're doing something right. And you're like,
Yeah,
oh, what
and
did I
take down
do?
like a whole service.
There's not this,
Yeah,
yeah,
like
exactly. Completely destroy your
yeah,
computer. Yeah. Oh, I love it. I think it was probably most helpful for me, like when I started like, and this was like early on, but when I started like shifting over to like Git, right? So I've been an engineer for a long time. So like Git was like this beautiful thing that came into my world after I had been an engineer for many
mhm,
years. And so that was like I think what really pushed my, bash scripting capabilities was to actually like, get involved and start, utilizing Git in that way. So man, that's been a long
yeah,
time. So cool. You are doing have done some awesome stuff. Now you're at
mhm.
Chalk. So tell me about Chalk, like what you're doing there. We talked about it a little bit on the pre-show, but I'd love to hear about what your kind of day-to-day looks like over at Chalk and what you're excited
Yeah,
about.
totally. Uh, yeah. So Orchid Chalk, uh, we're around like 50 people. Uh,
It's a good
yeah, we're
size.
hiring very, very fast. Like we've hired, yeah, we're hiring very quickly. I would say so. Chalk is, in I guess a few sentences, it's a data infrastructure platform that helps teams do real time machine learning and build AI systems. And so I guess the key words there are real time. And so by real time, we just mean like
Yep.
being able to like have a request. So think like I'm on a website, a user clicks something, and then I want to give them a recommendation. It's like between that
Mm-hmm.
click and when we give back a recommendation, Chalk can go out to a bunch of different data sources, fetch data, and then run a bunch of transformations on top of the data that it's fetched. And then that, and
Sure.
then it can essentially serve a response at scale with very low latency. And so end to end, like this can be, 10 milliseconds, 5 milliseconds. And so you end up being able to have essentially instant data compute. So like your product in a way is data. And
Mm.
this just unlocks
Yep.
so many things and so many affordances and a lot of ergonomics because like the code that you define to like transform this data after you fetched it now becomes effectively your
Yep.
model. because you end up decoupling, because
Right.
you end up having, you have like a data source, and then you have an ETL pipeline, and then you have like a model, and then you can like, and then you usually even have like post model, you might have some like tuning or tweaking on the client side. And ideally, if you build a platform that's really, really fast, you can kind of like move, because your model ends up being spread across like this ETL pipeline, at least in terms of what your model means, like semantically, because it's like you have some transformations that you're doing in
Yep.
ETL, some of the model, some of it like on the client. And if you can bring it all to one place, and then it gets defined fully as code. And so then your model can theoretically be version controlled, which it is for Chalk. You can have a branch, I can have a
That's
branch, and
beautiful.
then it's like we're running different models, and then I can have Chalk, run historical traffic against our branches, and then we can A/B test our models, and it just opens up so many things. And so yeah, I'm very excited to work
Yep.
there, and it's been very fun. I am the sole DevRel, um, but we're trying to
Ooh,
hire someone else, which would be really really fun, um, either in SF or in New York. Yeah, but that's kind of an explanation of what Chalk is.
I
Yeah.
love that. Well, what does your day to day look like? Because we had talked about, in the pre show, I was like, I know that there's like tons of AI events going on and there's a lot of direct hiring there. And I understand and get it, right? I'm in Texas, so I'm not in SF to be able to
Mhm.
be exposed to it, but I have seen all of the amazing events. And so when we were talking, you're like, you went to 3 events alone just
Yeah, yesterday.
yesterday. So what does that look like in terms of, yeah, like how you balance your day? Obviously, you're, diving into the code, utilizing it, building awesome things to enable developers, but like what else, comes into your sort of day to
Yeah,
day?
it's definitely a dream job because I love interacting with people, love talking to other developers. I would say at Chalk, I sit in engineering, and so I would say
Very
yeah, some
cool.
of my, so I guess the coding aspect of my job is two parts. It's like building out more sales demos, as well as
Mm-hmm.
um, like automating different like ops or pipelines or like stitching together different tools. So that's kind of like the growth engineer, GTM engineer type work. And then I
Yep.
write a lot. Like I write a lot of documentation. I do things like
Mm.
changelog, release notes. I also might help with like objections or something if someone has a really technical question about how we like deploy something, right? Because Chalk deploys into the VPC of the customer, and so there's always a lot of
Oh,
interesting
nice.
questions around like infrastructure and the setup and the layout and like the platform architecture. And then I also will like make diagrams, um, write blog posts, and so those are the core functions. And then on top of that, I'll go to like meetups to give demos of Chalk or to just attend and meet people, or also to like, just like hang out with a customer if they're attending and we just jam on Chalk. Uh, and so those are the core things. And then you always have these like random one-offs because you're a startup. I guess I also sometimes make short videos. I guess I can add that.
Mm.
Yeah. Those are the most of the things that I do. So it kind of changes day to day, week to week. Like the past couple of weeks are really different because Snowflake Summit and Databricks were both
Mm.
happening, and so that kind of completely changed my schedule. So it kind of just depends. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. That's a lot of different stuff.
Hmm.
And getting to report to engineering, I feel like is really powerful. There's, I've had a variety of different like DevRel roles and sort of different reporting structures from, a lot of marketing, honestly. Product engineering in one singular case, um, customer success, and then partnerships, right? And I think that just depending on sort of that objective, I think engineering is a really beautiful place for DevRel to sit, just so that they are still close to like their tied roots, right? Like the actual engineering roots, exposed to that as a part of that, and then really gets to kind of stick close to the engineering focus of the role. And it sounds like you get to do that, which is really
Hmm.
powerful. I love that. Okay, so what is the ecosystem like in AI right now compared to maybe what you were doing over at Warp? I'm not sure exactly if you were getting involved in events and getting involved in some of the other stuff, but what have you noticed as some of the sort of ecosystem differences?
Yeah. So Yeah, I was still doing events at work. Uh, Chalk and Warp have very different go-to-market motions, and so that kind of changes how you approach
For
things.
sure.
I would say, with regards to the ecosystem, um, I actually I end up interacting a lot more with people that are building in data infrastructure, and so the thing that I'm thinking
Mm,
about primarily is mostly like Apache Iceberg and things like Spark,
mm,
like query engines, execution engines, streaming, um, putting things on object storage, because it's like we have kind of this, Gen AI explosion or whatever. And I think the thesis for Chalk is that we have a lot of compute dedicated to training models, but then over
yep.
time, we're gonna have an even bigger explosion when it comes to like doing inference, because it's like chatbots, for them to work well and have a good user experience, you want them to have fresh data, and then you also want them to get data quickly. And so there's going to be a lot of infrastructure challenges and investment in being able to like support those types of workflows and those types of user experiences. Yeah, and so I actually interact mostly with people doing data infra, and so like my favorite conference from this past year was like Data Council, which is all just like data infra people that are
Mm,
like building in that space. And it's kind of crazy because it's like
yep.
I feel like with AI, one thing that's changed this year is I think there's still a lot of money going into it on the VC side. I feel like the rounds have kind of consolidated. So it's more like it's the same amount of money, but it's going to less places and bigger sums.
Mm,
And then
yep.
there's also been a lot of turbulence on the data infra side, because we've had like multiple acquisitions like the past 2 months. Like ClickHouse raised a Series
Yeah.
C, Hex raised money, Crunchy Data got acquired, Neon got acquired. So just like all this stuff has happened in like a 2 month period. It's like multiple acquisitions, multiple fundraisers, etc. And so that's a space I'm actually most interested in,
Yep.
because it's kind of sits below AI. And yeah, so I don't know.
Hmm.
We'll see. It's exciting. I think this will be a fun year. Lots of developments.
Yeah, that's really cool. Well, like we were talking in the pre-show, right? As I was what I'm pivoting my business over to is more like developer insights, not just developers, right? Just technical audience insights in general. So understanding sort of like their workflows and their process and their needs and their pains and their gains. And obviously like, with AI, expanding the ecosystem, everything is changing, right? How developers are thinking about their day to day, how they're writing code nowadays. And so like we were talking about earlier, is like I want to eventually create a model that is really honestly like processing a lot of data, because it's from all the conversations that we're having,
Mhm.
all the research that we're doing. Developers go through and they do like these product walkthroughs essentially, and so it's very candid, and they just like evaluate and try a product, and they screen record it, and they just commentate as they're walking through something. And so all of those different insights have led to a lot of like knowledge that I personally have just from witnessing them. And I realized I was like, whoa, there's a lot of data here, like actually processing of all these different insights, all the different knowledge that's learned. How can I start to create a model where someone can come in and sort of, it's similar, I guess, to like the essence of maybe like a crunch data, but not quite at that level, right? Where
Mhm.
it's like, it's more about that technical decision making. Like, how do I understand my buyer? How do I understand what they need in their workflows? How do I understand why they buy tools and what they buy tools for? And just being able to like crunch all that data. So, as I evolve my product, right now we're in the more like MVP, just getting clients to be able to actually come in and sort of like procure those types of insights. But I think that's like V3 of the app is essentially to start to do that, right? Is to start to bring all that data into a warehouse and start to be able to run models on it to find the different insights that companies might need for those decision making processes.
Yeah,
So long story short, as you and I were talking about it, like, yeah, I go ahead and jump in. All I was going to say is that I'm just like, I'm nerding out on this in like terms of listening and like, okay, cool. This is all stuff that I'm looking forward to diving into in the
yeah.
future.
I feel like two things came to mind for me when you were saying that, and I think yeah, one of the pain points I think you addressed and we might not talk about enough is like you're doing this at different fidelities, right? So like when you were talking, I thought of I don't know if you remember when they were like, oh, AI is going to can like help radiologists, right? And so for me, it's like I see you and
Mm,
I'm like, you're an expert with a very trained eye. And so it's like, how can we like build the system and process that can get AI to be able to operate at the same level? It definitely can't with regards to width, but at least we can like
yes.
get it to a place where it can like own this narrow subset of the things that you're thinking about when you're like helping dev tool startups. And then there's also like this thing about like,
Hmm.
okay, so we have these like calls, right? And it's like it's inherently a multimodal problem, right? Because it's like we have like unstructured data with regards to like transcripts and like when they say things and like product usage and like being able to like combine that with metrics in terms of like where people churn. And then you also have like the actual like
Yep.
screen recording and they're like showing you places in the product. And so this is like a super hard problem because you're like going out to different data sources, you have different types of data, and it's like, and ideally, um, oh yeah, I guess another project that comes to me is one of the things that I was like doing at Warp is like we would have like tons of GitHub issues, right? Like I think like
Hmm.
4,000 plus GitHub issues, and we had,
That's a
yeah, and
lot.
so yeah, because it's field G, and you could just have huge spikes in terms of like usage and people signing up. But there's this cool project of like,
Yep.
okay, we have this small cut here, and then we have another small cut here, and then we have another small cut here, and because these cuts are really really hard for the user to work around because they're based on like muscle memory. It's like they have this like thing ingrained into them, like key binding, that is different in warp than their
Yep.
old tool, and they might not churn
Yep.
from
For
warp
sure.
the first week, but like this small like combination of these like weak cuts like a month from now might end up them churning, and they really want to use warp because they've been able to stay there for a month. So it's like, how
Yeah.
can we like find these small cuts in like a longitudinal way and say like, okay, let's package this into a project, and then this would actually like get retention
Hmm.
up like 1 or 2% or something. uh yeah, but they feel
Yes.
too small to like prioritize immediately, but it's like together they actually are
Yep.
worth something. Yeah, but
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Like, and that plays into a lot of it. Like, sort of as I was telling you, kind of the first version of what I brought together is like a framework around sort of the idea of a developer adoption
mhm,
score, right? What is the likelihood that a developer is going to come to your platform and sign up for your product and actually give it a chance,
yeah,
right? Because that early part of it is the part that is so mysterious because you don't even get their email. You don't even know that they're there because as soon as they see like a book a call link, they're like, I'm gone, I'm out, right? And of course, that depends. If they're an enterprise developer and they're specifically looking for something like like Chalk, right? Very enterprise
mhm,
focused, they understand that there's going to have to be a procurement process and whatever. But still, they're going to want to do that on like some random day or an evening or a weekend. They're going to want to dive through, figure out what your product is. Is this valid? Is there any validity to this before I even bring it back to my team? And I think a lot of the founders that I've been talking to over the last like couple of years really fall into that bucket of like just they don't get it. They don't know where they're dropping off. They're getting the traffic, but they're not getting the signups or they're getting, some level of attribution, right? But it's not actually following through. So anyways, I think there's actually a lot of pain points to be solved here. Like if there could be a potential where obviously there's tons of videos that are getting brought through where developers are walking through, like that actually gets down into like the nitty gritty of truly like the product experience and like how that product experience can play into how to build a better product for developers and a whole slew of other stuff, right? So yeah, the data sources are very unique, so I'll definitely be diving into a whole
yeah,
new
yeah,
challenge that I haven't dove into before for sure.
nice.
Yeah. So you were talking about another project that you were working on. I would love to chat about that. And then I think maybe like, dive into some of the tools that you love to use. But if you want to,
Yeah,
anyways,
oh
like
yeah,
it sounded like you were working on a project to sort of surface GitHub repos and things. So I'd love to hear about that more.
yeah. Might just be easy for me to screen share. Let's see.
Yeah. I think you should have the permission to go ahead and do it.
Yeah. Okay. Do people see this?
Here we go. Add to the scene. Yep. I got it added.
Okay, cool. So I'm essentially working on this short project. Okay. So the intuition here is that I've started a lot of projects. like 1.3K. And I used to like keep these lists, right? So I used to be like, MCP, Rust, etc. And so I'd essentially tried to like organize these things that I've starred into these lists. That way, they're easier for me to find. Uh, Especially because it's
For sure.
like this project is LSTR. Like I these are just like 4 letters, concatenated. And so sometimes it's like really, really hard to like
Yep.
remember a project, but I remember what it does. And so I essentially was like, oh, why don't we just
Yeah.
like do rag on the readmes of all these projects, and
Mm.
then I can just locally run like,
Yep.
a vector search and then like be able to more easily find these things. And so like I can just show you what this looks like. See, feature set. Yeah, and the fun thing is that because I work at Chalk, I get to use Chalk, and the easiest way for me to do this was by far
Amazing.
with using Chalk. And so the cool thing is that I can make like this like little Python data class, and so this is like for a
Mm-hmm.
project, and then I can add these like attributes to my class, and we're just going to call these features. And so I have like the path, and then I essentially like extract I check whether the project path is valid. And then the cool thing is that after I have this path, I can actually create other types of feature classes or other types of like these other Python data classes. And so I have one for like repo
Mm-hmm.
here. And so let's see, let me jump to this class. There's a lot of references, and so sometimes it's like I'm trying to
No
figure
worries.
out like which one of these. Let me just get up repo. Yeah, so I have this like repo feature class, and this has a bunch of attributes. And then I also do this for like user, etc. And so I'll show you what this query looks like. So I do something like, get a project is polars. I can essentially give Chalk this path, and then after it gets this path, it can use that as like a join key, and then it can go out, and then it can essentially resolve the other classes that are connected to it. And so it's going to go out to like GitHub and then call
Mm.
their repo API, call their user API, and then fetch that data. And then this archive object is going to be like, I have a SQL database where I pulled like how many stars this project or like 10,000 projects got in 2024. And then this VDB class is going to be a feature class that is the results back of a vector search. And so yeah, and
Oh.
so let me just go to the actual vector search. So this Lance, I think I called it Lance. Yeah. And so what's happening is I essentially scraped like 10,000 projects, and then I had AI summarize the README, and then I put those into a vector database. And so I'm just like going out to this vector database, and then what I'll do is when I do a search, let's see, search, GitHub search, is that what it's called? Yeah. Okay, so whenever I do a search, let's see, let me find. Yeah. Okay, so essentially when I do a GitHub search, I'm going to pass in a query. And so I guess what that looks like is like, say I do this like terminals in Rust or whatever. It's like when I run this query, I'm going to take this text, and then I'm going to use Chalk essentially to call like vertex. Then I'm going to run this embedding, and then I'm going to like send that vector after I make it. I can essentially reference that here. Where is it? Oh, it's here. So I can say like, okay, this GitHub search class, pull the vector out, and then after I have the vector, I can do like a vector search, and then I can get results back. And so now I can essentially search through all these projects and then get these results back. And if I
Yeah.
let's see, JSON bulk, put this in FX. This should work. We'll see. I always forget the flags, which is why I need warp. Yeah,
That's
it's
right.
like, yeah,
Side projects, right?
yeah. And so I can pretty much like get a bunch of results back, and then I can like go through these and filter them out. And so if I look at some of these fields, I can see that I have like a completion. Um, I also have like the descriptions of all these projects, and I'm using Cerebrus just because it's faster. And then this is like what my
Sure.
prompt looks like. And I guess another nice thing that made this easy is that I can just use Jinja templates. And so I can say like GitHub search and then this feature,
Mm,
and then Chalk will automatically make sure it fetches those features to pass into the sub chat completion in this prompt. So Chalk will like,
that is
yeah, yeah. So
handy.
it like manages the feature retrieval, and then I can like use the structured output to
Hmm.
be like, it can give me back the URL that best matches my search query, and also give me like a confidence score. Yeah, and so it's like now I can just like quickly search for projects like from my terminal. And
Yep.
I was thinking of maybe like making a UI that calls Chalk, and then maybe I can just like put on Hacker News, and then other people can also like search for projects. So I feel like I could probably get like maybe like another 10,000, and maybe all the projects that have like over 1,000 stars or something, and then just put those in the
Yeah.
record, and then other people can just like use it, and then kind of like get a sense of like how easy, because like this is like, you know, this is what 100 lines of code, and then you just need the code for like how to pull from the vector
Right.
database, and then I can deploy this, and then like literally millions of people can use it, and I don't have to worry about the infra, which is really nice. Yeah, so it's like
Yeah.
fun being able to like have access to a tool that like, companies
It's so
pay millions of
powerful.
dollars for, and then I just get to use it as much as I want. Yeah, so
Yeah.
it's kind of like a developer dream. Yeah, but that's like one of the things
Uh,
I've been working on just to like solve my own problem. But
I was just gonna say, like, this is such a cool, like, problem to solve. Like, A, it's neat that you get to, like, dog food your company's product, honestly, because it's always good to do that, especially in DevRel, because then it's like, yay, you can catch all the hiccups, right? And then figure
yeah,
out, does this mean I need to improve documentation or create resources? But at the same time, like, that's a really lucrative tool because there are tons of times where like I've obviously started something, but then like you said, you go back and you're trying to find it and you're like, what was it
yeah,
named? Like maybe the description is lacking. Maybe a developer just pulled it together really quickly. Like I've done this where it's just a quick GitHub repository and it's out there and maybe you didn't do a great job describing it, but you're like, hey, it's there if you want to pick it
mhm,
up. Maybe you link to it in a presentation, but you don't necessarily you
yeah,
know, actually have all the details in there. So this allows you to like, dig through and find it. So I could very much see where other developers would benefit from you putting this out into the world for
yeah.
sure.
Hopefully, yeah. I also feel like ideally, if we put it out and then it gets traction, it'll make it easier for people to like contribute to other projects because they won't start from scratch.
Hmm.
It's like why like it's like, especially because you can like vibe code and use AI to like make a project from scratch. It's like why would I spend 3 hours checking to see if my idea already exists if I can just like get into Cursor and code for 3 hours and be like 75% of the way there. So
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Nice to see JB in the chat. Hello, hello, friend. Excited to see you. I love that. Okay, so we talked a little bit about some of like the tools that you're using, and some of like your preferences. You obviously are, big into like command line and some of those stuff. So for other developers who are listening, this is always like a really hot part of the show where they enjoy hearing some of the tools that you use. So what are some of the things that are, I guess, your normal like day-to-day tools on top of things that you just really
yeah,
enjoy?
can I screen share again? Maybe yeah.
Yeah, go
Okay,
ahead.
so
Screen share all you
yeah,
want.
so one of the okay, so there's a couple things. So I guess the first thing is that I have some tools on my GitHub README. These aren't just so these are like the CLIs that I like a lot, and these are kind of just the tools I use day to day. Um, a couple of things that are really
Sorry, I had to like actually turn on.
say again.
I said I had to turn on the screen recording. It didn't. I turned it on right away. So now we're
Okay,
good.
yeah, yeah,
Now they
cool,
can
cool.
actually
Yeah,
see your
so I
screen.
have some projects and tools that I use every day or just daily, and I have some CLIs
Love
here.
this.
And I have a longer list in this like CLI star list. So I guess there's like 100 projects in here. I will say though that one of the things that's really helpful for me is I have a really big GitHub config or Git config. And so I just have like a
Mm,
ton of
hmm.
commands in here. And I guess one of my favorite tools when I'm like programming is this tool called Graphite. And so I can essentially do like, I'll show you. So let's say I go into like I don't want to use what's it called. Let me just go IntelliJ. So like let's say I don't know, change this file, and then I can see like my git config. I can make a branch with Graphite. And then let's say I also change this one. Actually, no. Let me stash that. Let me change something like down here. How I did Elvis test 02. So then if I like make this branch, Graphite makes it really easy for me to like see these branches and the order that they're in. And then Graphite also has commands for me to like move this branch around. So I can I just move this branch to be on top of
That's
main.
handy.
Yeah. And then I can also switch back to my old branch, and then I can move it back on top of the other one. So it's easy for me to move branches around. I can also do this from this CLI. And so I could have 10 branches here, and then I could reorder them. And then Graphite will go through and automatically reorder them and then restack them. And then I can also into the one above it. I'm not sure why it's taking a long time. I can see that now these are one branch. Then I can squash this into one commit, and then I could open up a pull request for this. And the nice thing about Graphite is that they also have AI pull request review, but they also have AI for helping you actually write the PR description. And so at Warp,
That's handy.
I was building a lot kind of as a solo person, and I pretty much for 2 years did not write a single PR description. They were all AI generated. And the nice thing though is that they end up being better than actual engineers' PR descriptions, right? Because they have way more content, and it makes the PRs a lot more searchable, right, from the GitHub UI and things. And so Graphite is definitely a good tool. It's kind of hard to tell what commands I was running though, because they're all aliased, and so you can see this BCA is actually GT up, and then I run this linter check and things. Yeah, so I guess one thing to say is if you're making Git aliases, it's better to gate them behind actual Git. So I see some people do let's say GCO to do Git commit, right? But instead of doing GCO, you should do G and then space and then CO. That way everything gets aliased behind your original Git or your G alias. That way, if you end up downloading a CLI tool that has conflicting namespace, then this ends up not happening. And then you can always just have an alias. If you look at my bash RC, you can see I do have aliases for Git, but it just turns back into G and then USO or Git USO. And so that's been super helpful for navigating the command line. And then some of the other tools that I really there's a tool called BAT. And so let's say I cat split panes. So this is a regular cat, but then if I do this with BAT, I'll essentially get nice colors because it'll parts the text tree. So I really like BAT. I showed you earlier FX for navigating JSONs. That's really helpful. Another tool that I use a lot is called Zan, and so I can do Zan view and then a CSV, and then it shows me the CSV and CLI. I can also do
That's handy.
they have a flatten. I think flatten is the name. Yeah, they have this flatten thing where I can actually print out every single row by itself. And then the cool thing is that with Warp, I can grep the output of a block even while it's still outputting, and so I can do a block filter, and then I can say birthday, and now I can only see all the birthdays that are in here, or I can quickly find someone's name, right? So I can do Belina and then see them. And so this in combination with Warp block filters are super helpful, right? I guess a better example is if I go back to this, I do cat corpus, and then I do I do 470. I can see all the lines 470, 4701. And because this is happening at the terminal layer and not the CLI, it's like I could
Mm-hmm.
still be printing logs, and then Warp is just gripping the view, and it ends up being lossless because we're just like only doing it on the view, not like the actual underlying data. Yeah,
Yeah,
which is really nice for like data to keep data. Yeah, but there are like tools here that I like, and then these are some of the
I love that.
CLIs. Yeah, Delta's really good. So Delta is what I was using for essentially the Git diffs. So like if I do GD like
Mm,
4, yeah, like 1 it shows me the file, so I
yep.
can like click this file and then I can jump into it. And do it like this. So I can like click this command click and then it opens up in my editor. It also does like this highlighting, and so this is like super helpful for like looking at Git diffs. So those are some of the tools that I like, but there's a bigger list in the little star section. We go to like CLI.
I love
Yeah.
that. Yeah, you have invested heavily in like sort of your own personal like developer documentation of the things that you use, which I think is like super helpful and like sort of one of the at least one of the reasons like I did the show was like
Mhm.
to like I guess like re-dive back into like, I don't want to say like re-dive back into technology because I'm still obviously an engineer by trade, but like sometimes I think in DevRel, I've had roles that have pulled me away from actually being in the code.
Oh,
And so one of the reasons
yeah,
for the show was like to just yeah, to just like hear what other people are like working with and what they're working on. And
yeah,
so it's actually really cool to see all that because having all those shortcuts and stuff is so
yeah.
handy.
The one other tool I would add is DLT. Actually, I'll show this again. This DLT is the coolest. So if I
Mm.
go, let me just open up.
I just-
Let's see, CLT, see growth machine. If I open this up, so there's a tool called DLT, and DLT is essentially, you can think of it as a Python SDK for doing ETL. And so a good
Mm.
example, do I have DLT? Okay, I guess this is a good example. And so I have this, so I'll just import, like DLT. What's the source? Destination might be a better search. Oh god, there's so many files in here. Another problem is that like I'll do something from like 3 months ago, and then I'm like trying to figure out like, okay, like where is the code for that thing that I built? Oh man, let me just go to the
I
website.
think that's just a normal developer problem.
Yeah. So DLT essentially is an SDK for doing uh, ETL, and the cool thing is that they have like thousands
Mm,
and
yeah.
thousands of destinations, and so DLT makes it really easy for me to like build an ETL pipeline. So I have this pipeline. Actually, I want a more comprehensive example than this. Examples. Yeah. Let's see if we can just like find one of these. I don't want a Jupyter notebook though. But I can essentially like say like, okay, I have this data coming in from some REST API, and then I can like write a function for like parsing the data that's coming in, and then I can essentially use these like decorators.
Mm,
This is also not showing me what I want. I can essentially like use these helpers. So this is a config. So let's see Q. Q might have something. No, that's a class. Runner, please have something. So I can actually be like, oh, I have this thing in some API or in like an S3 bucket, and then I want to like send it to a database or send it to Iceberg. And then I just need to define my logic once
mhm,
for how to connect to that particular source or that particular destination. And then DOT can manage like actually
mm,
moving data from one place to another. And so then in practice, I end up only writing logic for how to transform that data in between those two places. And this is super cool because since all of this is as
hmm,
an SDK, one, all of your ETL pipelines are now written declaratively. Two, they can be version controlled.
mhm,
And then three, you can run them on your own compute, right? And so instead of me having to like buy something like
mm.
Fivetran or like Airbyte, it's like I can use DLT and then I can run my own
Yep.
compute. And so then I can run it on like, some other tool that, is really good at handling Python workflows like Temporal or like Tower. yeah, and so that's like super helpful. And I haven't worked on that project in a while, so it was like hard for me to find the code, and I apologize that I couldn't show you more. But that's like really, really helpful
Oh, it's
if you're
totally
doing
fine.
like growth engineering, because you end up like sending tools to so many different
Yeah.
places, and you're just like stitching together tools. Yeah.
Right.
So
Yep. Very cool. Well, thank you for the demo. Code struggles aside, but we've all been there,
yeah,
so all good.
yeah.
Okay, so like one final question. We've been, it's been a while. At least we've been chatting for a while, but this has been super fun to kind of hear about your life and like what you work
Hmm.
on and the things that you're doing and your tips and tricks, obviously. So if you get stuck working on something, what is your go-to today? Go to your peers? Are you leveraging, like different AI models to do that? Like what helps you get unstuck, or is it more of like, just
Unstuck.
traditional?
I see. I see. I see. Uh, yeah. I like. I mean, that's why I love open source is that I can actually go to the source code and then see
Yep.
things. Um, yeah, and so I actually have the easiest time getting unstuck when I'm using an open source tool, and then
Mm,
I'm not like gated on getting a response from like customer support or something. So like a good example of
yep.
this, like I was like struggling. Okay, because I wanted all of my configuration in my Python function for like this
Mhm.
DLT example,
Sure.
because like they have like a YAML config that I can also include, but ideally I can keep it all in one Python file. That way, if someone else looks at it, they don't have to like figure out like there's some
Mm,
behavior that's happening and it's not coming from this file. How do I find it? And they have to message me.
y
And so I
yep.
ended up like having to like go through like the actual source code and be like, what is this environmental variable flag that I
Yep.
can set? So I'm just like searching through, and then I finally find like the 6 lines that are doing what I want, and then I can like, okay, this particular flag that I need to like turn on and import as a secret. And then a second example on the opposite side of that is there's this tool called Adio, which is like a modern CRM,
Yep.
and they they have essentially like an open API spec on their developer docs,
Mhm.
and they had a website kind of redesign. They essentially switched tools. So I think they were hosting their docs by themselves, and then they switched like a documentation tool, like Milify, I think.
Mhm.
And in the process of that, this link to their API spec was no longer there. And so I had to like
Mm.
email customer support and be like, okay, I need your API spec. And they'd be like, oh, our API spec is not available for download. And then I would have to like respond and be like, it was available for download like a week ago. It literally was on your website. I'm giving you feedback to tell you to put it back on because the developers don't want to like manually copy and paste these like get requests and then create the spec from scratch. It's like I just want to download this JSON, import it into like Postman or import it into whatever
Yep.
like local tool I'm using, and then have access. And then they were like, so then I actually directly emailed someone else at the company and was like, go get me this spec. And then they got me the spec from engineering. And then I sent their response to the customer support person. And they're like, oh, it seems like they got it from engineering. And then I was like, yes, please add this back to your website. Because like this could be the reason I stopped using your tool, right? And like use a different
Exactly.
yeah, yeah. Yeah. So it's kind of like being able to like interact with like people that are like in customer support, customer success that go
Uh-huh.
the extra step in terms of like making the experience better, and people that just like take your feedback seriously. Like one other example of that is when I first started using Adio, they have an endpoint where you can essentially do a search across all of your records, and then by
Mhm.
default they have this like filter. They have like this filter field, and the filter field has an empty dictionary that's included automatically. But if you have an empty dictionary, the search automatically searches for nothing. And so I like for
Mm.
40 minutes was like, I don't understand why I'm getting no results back. And then I
Yep.
deleted this field just randomly, and then I got results back. And then I was like, okay, this is the behavior where like in Python, this would do something else, right?
Yep.
Uh, and so like my expectation is that if I pass in an empty dictionary, I'm not going to have no filter. I just want you to assume that the We don't care about the filter. And so I had to like tell
Yep.
them, like, as a Python developer, this is what I was expecting based on this particular syntax. And yeah, so things like that. It's like very like small nitty gritty things that
Yep.
take 40 minutes to figure out. Yeah. So, but hopefully, like once it's done, like never happens again to another customer, right? So I do try to like
Yep.
forward feedback because I care about it. But
That's like the exact stuff that like why I pivoted my business was to find things like that, right? To like put
yeah,
developers in the spaces to be able to like highlight those kinds of insights because like even though to them like they might not think it's like a giant deal, but then hearing directly from you or even like again being able to watch a developer fail on that and then see like oh my gosh, wow, this is such a like fundamental thing that a developer should be able to do, but we've put this weird block in place or made it more difficult because of how they've created it. So that's really interesting. I am a big fan of Adio, actually, like the actual CRM, but I haven't dove into the API yet because I've sort
mhm.
of just been getting my feet, in there and using it. So very interesting to hear about that. So I
Can I add
love
one more
that.
thing?
Yeah, of course
One
you
more thing.
can.
One more thing. Okay, okay, okay. So uh, this was actually one of the reasons at Warp they sponsor a lot of hackathons, right? Because some
Mm-hmm.
people like I'll get there and then some of these kids are like, "Oh, are you here to like hire to hire us?" And I'm like, "Kinda. Like none of you guys know Rust, right?" So it's like hiring you is actually really expensive with regards to like our time as a team. Uh,
Yep.
but one of the benefits of a hackathon is that I can watch people install Warp over and over and over in person, right? Because it's like
Yep.
even though we have like thousands of GitHub issues, it's like GitHub is still here, and then we have like someone installing it here. And so there are people that we're
Yep.
gonna miss in the funnel that never make it to opening up a GitHub issue, right? And so it's like, and if you don't
Exactly.
like see that live, it's like you just have because like the last time I logged in was like 2 years prior, and I've never needed to log in again.
Right.
Yeah, so it's like being able to like see people struggle with onboarding, especially like new grads, new developers who haven't customized the terminal. Um, yeah, and it's also cool because like there are also differences there where like they are much more willing to log into the terminal versus like a
Mm-hmm.
staff engineer that started using like iTerm 20 years ago, and so it's also interesting seeing the different types of expectations and them just being able to like click through and do onboarding versus a staff engineer like reading every single page and like different personas and seeing how they interact with the product is really helpful.
Yes.
Yeah.
I honestly feel like so I was just chatting with somebody about this in DevRel and we were talking about what we feel like the truest essence of DevRel is. And we were talking
Hmm.
about how powerful internal hackathons are. So not where you're just like, hey, everyone come to a hackathon, but where you go to like a big enterprise company and you have a hackathon inside of that company because like a it gets them away from sort of the grind of their day to day, but b the things that you were saying, right, is like it gives them this opportunity to sort of like step away from that day to day and then like actually ideate and expand. And so as like a product, right, you go into that hackathon, not only do you get to see all of their opinions, all the struggles, all the issues that they have because you're there supporting them, walking them through it, experiencing it alongside of them, but then you also get to see how they ideate, right, like from what we tell them, from what we've given them, what types of things do they start to ideate and get inspired by building. And I think that alone is incredibly
Yeah.
powerful. Like when I was at Snap, like that was the thing that we were really trying to like, the objective wasn't revenue, and I struggled with that because I'm always like, revenue, how is it influencing revenue? The
Yeah.
objective was like carving out an augmented reality ecosystem, especially with like AI being, obviously the A
Hmm.
acronym that sort of won out. And I was like, how can we start to get people to think about augmented reality and what they can build with it? And so it was so interesting to go into a company at an internal hackathon and have everyone sort of like ideating, hey, we have this web app, we have this mobile app, we have this situation
Hmm.
already. How do we think about expanding upon that and really ideating with it? So it's like, it's great for feedback, it's great for inspiration, it's great for, being able to know how to fill in your resources. And it's also great for like some demo code too, because if any of the projects make it, right, publish them out on GitHub, and before you know it, now you have sort of this like ideation repository
Yeah.
of different things that can be built. So yeah, they don't always align, but I think that there's always a good case for a hackathon. It just sort of depends on who your audience is, what your objectives are, and what you're looking to do. But I fully agree, they can be powerful.
Yeah. Even for leadership, being able to get a better pulse of what developers are thinking about at the company, right?
Mm-hmm.
I do totally resonate with your point about like trying to tie things to revenue because you can't
Yeah.
sell developer experience. Like I don't know if people have I don't know if people have tried to sell developer experience, but you can't sell it. It has to be able to like map to like either more revenue or less costs or like preventing the company from being sued. At the end of the day, developer experience is kind of just like this
Yep.
side thing, but you can't sell it by itself for sure.
I agree with that. And I think it's interesting too because it's like it is such a necessary thing. Like the key messaging I think on my website is like you're missing developers before they even hit your funnel because like that's all it is, right? Developer experience is those first sort of early minutes or even, first few hours, right, of like using a product, trying it out, diving in, trying to find the solution. And you just don't have exposure to that. And so like you said, it doesn't directly tie to revenue, but when that developer experience goes well, it does tie into sort of that acquisition and then the attribution and then retention, right?
Mhm.
When you actually provide that developer experience. So I actually just wrote a post yesterday about sort of what I'm looking for in my new role. And I was like, I want to impact revenue and I want to impact retention. And I was hopeful that with that statement, it was really clear that like I deeply care about the leads actually coming to fruition, but also that those leads don't just come to fruition, that they truly find success on the platform and they retain users on the platform, which to me feels like the truest essence of developer experience in a
Yeah,
nutshell.
for sure. Yeah, and building dev tools is really fun because the the alignment of what it is that you're selling is just so much more clear and maps so much more closely to
Mm-hmm.
productivity. Like it was weird being at Facebook and being like, the more people use this, the more money we make. But I actually don't want my friends to use this more, you know? And being in DevTools is like, oh, this thing that I'm working on, even if nobody else uses it, I don't care because I'm going to use it, right? And that was a lot of warp. It's like this,
It saves you
yeah, it's like
time.
I'm building this thing for me because I wish warp did this. Yeah, I feel like that's just kind of like a dream world as a developer, is to make stuff that you yourself use. And it's kind of like also one of my,
Yep.
I guess a I don't know how, like it's like a guideline for how I choose a job is like, would I use this
Mm,
tool and would I be excited about making this tool better because I also use this tool. And I'm kind of privileged in that I can like, ideally only work at places where I have that experience, but it definitely changes the amount of effort and the amount of excitement I can have around a tool. It just makes the whole working experience a lot better.
yep. I think for me, it's like what is like in the true like root of what I want to do is like I want to empower
Mhm.
developers. And like even though that in the early days of like how I'm thinking about my future roles, like I'm really thinking about more in like a technical partnerships
Mhm.
capacity, but it's more because I want to directly sit next to a developer, a development team within a company that I'm supporting from my company, right? That we can actually like build something out that's meaningful. And so that's why it plays into retention, right? Because it has this conversation of like, you have this main problem that needs to be solved. I work at a company that solves this problem. Like, how can I help you solve your problem so that you can be more efficient, so that you can have a better workflow or a better process in your
Mhm.
day? And then hopefully that means that both parties win. And I think having that mindset of like it's for the developer just attributes back to the company, right? Because when you have that and you're going in and you're like, let me help you get started, of course they're going to, well, not of course, but it's more likely that they're going to be retained customers because you've sat down with them,
Yeah,
you've helped them work through that problem, you know that the product is for them, and then it makes that a whole lot easier. So
super.
yeah, well, this has been, yeah. Go ahead. I was gonna say this has been such a fun conversation.
Yeah. Devereaux is definitely like, oh, I had this one thought. I guess this will be my last thought, but I feel like the reason I'm in Devereaux, I feel like Devereaux at the core, at least for me, is kind of has this component of like evangelizing. And so I feel like I was made with regards to my personality to be someone that evangelizes. Like it's really good for me to like tell any person about something that I think is actually a good thing. And so it just
Mm-hmm.
happens to be that this core characteristic of personality of evangelizing can also be applied to products. And I feel like that's how I got into Devereaux. Yeah,
Yes.
but
Yeah. I fully agree with that. And honestly, like, I actually think that that's why DevRel is sort of enticing to like, I don't want to say every engineer because there are some people who are like, absolutely do not put me in front of people, but how it is enticing to like most engineers because at the end of the day, like, it is our nature by default to like go tell our peers the products that we love, because we know that as a technical
Yeah,
person ourselves, that's how we make decisions, right? I want to go to you and be like, hey, what tools are you using? Like, as we talked about chalk, I'm like, oh, this is going to be great. When I get to that stage of my product, like, I'm going to come to you and I'm going to be like, hey, let's talk
yeah,
shop. Here's what I want to do. How can we bring this together, right? And I'm not going to go to someone who isn't my peer, who I don't know, and be like, oh, what do you use? The trust isn't going to be there. The buy-in isn't going to be
yeah,
there. But if you tell me that something is great, I'm going to be like, heck yes, I'm going to check it out. And so that, I think, also is like really the ties of DevRel, and I feel like is like oh, that's a great comment, is like really why I love it so much, right? Is like I want to tell people about the stuff that I love. And so this is just a way to get paid to do
for
that.
sure.
And I think it's also a beautiful go to market like motion, right? And so I think that again is like why dev tools are probably so enticing to the both of us, is that it's like we really in our roots get to like be like, hey dude, check out this really awesome product that we personally love and
Yeah,
use.
cool. That was very fun. Thanks for having me.
Love it. Well, of course. This has been such a fun conversation. So before we
Yeah.
wrap up, where can folks find you? You've shared a lot of really cool stuff. Your GitHub obviously
Uh,
has a lot of awesome things on it. So just let us know, where can we find you, and I'll put it in the show notes in the podcast.
the only tools I use social media wise are GitHub and LinkedIn. I don't really have anything else,
Love
or my
it.
email. This is Elvis at Elvis.ai, which I actually bought in like 2019 before AI. I like. There's so many random things where I was like, I'm gonna do this thing, and then like 4 years later, there's like a crazy. It's like I bought this email as a sophomore in college, like way before ChatGPT.
You knew.
But I didn't know. I just was like, oh, like, because I tried to buy Elvis.com, but it's like Elvis Presley obviously has Elvis.com. And there's no way, there's like no way. So I was like, all right, let me
Yeah,
get this Elvis.ai thing. And now it's like, many years later, that's been to my benefit. Yeah, but yeah,
it's
Elvis at
super
Elvis.ai.
valid.
Yeah. Or
Yeah.
LinkedIn. I use LinkedIn a lot.
That's amazing. Okay. I think in the commentary of what you said, like coming back to sort of something you said originally, and I don't like spend a ton of time on this part of the show, but I would like to think that like that's sort of the like Holy Spirit,
Oh,
right?
for
Of
sure.
like guiding us before we even see the things that we need to be guided into. It's like the beautiful blessings that are just handed to us. And later we're like, ah, I see you. I see how you made that
Okay.
happen in
I
my
have
life.
one more
So
example of
I think
this.
that's beautiful.
I there was a professor. Okay, we had a professor come give a talk, and he was working on improving. He was building a Python profiler, and he essentially was building a set of
Mm-hmm.
tools to help people debug their Python and like make Python faster. And so his kind of like life academic
Handy.
research is like, how can we make Python faster? And then I told the professor this after a
Mm.
talk, not one of my favorite professors. I was like, I want to work on making Python faster. And then that professor was like, "Oh, that's dumb. Like, why would you like, what, like, I don't think that would be like a good trajectory." And it's like here I am 7 years later, like working at a startup that lets you write Python and then runs it super super fast. And so it's like I do this thing out there that was very random, and it's like I am actually going to do that, and it was very random, very sporadic, and it's kind of you just like end up in these like situations where like things manifest that you just had said, and it's not until like this that I like even remembered that happening, right? And I don't know. So it's like I feel like a lot
Yeah.
of full circles, but when God's involved for sure.
I agree. It's those are always interesting too, and I don't know about you, but like, I'm constantly like expanding and looking to like be a better Christian and, live more biblically, like at least by his plan, right? And like listening for that. And so in those kinds of situations, it's one of those things that's like, okay, was that sort of like this little like voice from him that's like, hey, this is what you should chase after, and like this is something in the future? Or is it just
Mhm.
sort of a manifestation of something that we want, that, God's will comes to be, because it's like, it's the blessings and all that he gives. So
Yeah, yeah,
to be determined,
yeah.
right?
TBD. Oh, I guess one last thing that also came to mind. I'm working on so like being in San Francisco. I've literally been to I would say a couple hundred talks on RAG, right? And I was like,
So jealous.
I'm not because it's like I'm tired of hearing about rag. Like this is all that I hear. Uh, but like
True,
a few
true.
weeks ago, I was like in the shower and I was like, oh, I should build a rag app for my church. And I was like, I can just
Aw.
like download every sermon that we have from YouTube, pull out the transcript, and then make like these sermons like searchable. And like that would probably take me like 3 days, but like the potential impact. But it's like there's no way the church can hire someone to do that, right? But it's like given that I've been to 200 rag
Exactly.
talks, it's like I could do that in like a weekend. That's why I was like, oh, let me just do this project, yeah. And so now I'm gonna work on that probably over like July 4th or something, and then ideally send it to my pastor and be like, hey, if
Uh,
anyone's ever looking for like a sermon on marriage, just let them type marriage into this app, and then they're gonna get like every sermon and then a link to the timestamp on YouTube for where you talk about marriage. And then ideally, I can just like send that to another church and be like, hey, just run this script, and you'll have all of your sermons. Yeah,
mm,
but stuff like that. Yeah.
that's like the powerful yeah, for sure, exactly, like that's the powerful stuff. And I think, like, there's a lot of like, or can be a lot of negative connotation, especially like in the religious ecosystem around AI and sort of where it's going.
Mm,
But I think there's just, it's like any other technology, right? There's like going to be some good and there's some bad, and I think the good can be so powerful. Like we actually were just talking in like a developer Bible study, which I'm going to invite you in, by the
mm,
way. We were just talking about it yesterday about oh my gosh, my brain just completely forgot what I was going to say. Where did it go? Brain, pick it back up
pick it
again.
up.
Oh, we were talking about the idea of sort of being in it, right? Like being in life where like things are just hard or troublesome, or you're just struggling to make a decision. Like for me, it's like, when do I give up on my business and get a full-time job? And just having those moments where like you want to go to the Lord and you want to pray about it, and you're hoping that there's something that comes back and he tells you or guides you,
Mm,
right? Mostly just guides you in what you're not doing
yeah.
right. But just being able to like kind of journal that and then get back like some scripture or sermons, right? Or just something that would sort of work you through that moment. So I think there's a lot that can really be done with AI that I think would be really beautiful, to just be able to like have some insights that are coming from the Bible, that are coming from a good place, but yet you can sort of use technology
Yeah.
to kind of pull them out and
Yeah.
find them.
Yeah, for sure.
Love. This has been such a lovely conversation. Thank you so much for your time today. Appreciate all the chatter in the chat and all that have joined us. Thank you so much. I hope you have
Yeah,
a
totally.
fabulous rest of your day.
Definitely. Yeah.